There is a man standing in the middle of a burning city. His home is gone, his fortune gone. The empire he built with his own 2 hands is turning to ash around him. And yet he is calm, not numb, not in denial, calm. He simply says, "This too is fine." That man was not a monk. He was not a soldier hardened by war. He was a Stoic, and what he understood, what you are about to learn, is a set of habits so powerful that once you master them, no chaos on this earth will be able to touch the stillness inside you. This is the Stoic art of inner peace, and by the end of this video it will belong to you. Welcome back to Wisdom of the Stoics, the home of ancient wisdom for the modern mind. If you're new here, this is where we take the timeless teachings of Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca, and turn them into practical tools you can use today in your actual life, at work, in your relationships, in the quiet moments when no one else can see what you're carrying. If that sounds like something you need, hit subscribe now, because what you're about to hear may be the most important 7 habits you ever learn. Let me ask you something before we begin. When was the last time you felt truly calm? Not distracted calm, where the noise is just muted for a moment. Not medicated calm, where you've numbed yourself into stillness. I mean earned calm, the kind that comes from knowing, deep in your bones, that nothing outside of you has the power to shatter what's inside of you. If you can't remember the last time you felt that, you are not alone, and it is not your fault. We were never taught this. No one sat us down in school and said, "Here is how to remain unshaken when your world falls apart." We were taught math. We were taught history. We were taught how to pass exams. But no one taught us the one subject that determines whether we suffer or whether we thrive, the mastery of our own mind. That is exactly what the Stoics spent their entire lives studying. And today we are going to walk through 7 habits, 7 deliberate, repeatable practices that the Stoics used to build what they called the inner citadel, an unshakable fortress of the mind that no storm, no betrayal, no tragedy could ever break into. I want you to imagine for a moment that peace of mind is not something that happens to you. It is something you build brick by brick, the same way a mason builds a wall. Each habit in this video is a brick. By the end, you will have the blueprint for a fortress that will serve you for the rest of your life. Stay with me until the end, because habit number 6 is the one that changes everything, as it's the practice that separates people who merely know Stoicism from people who actually live it. And the final habit ties every single piece together into something you can start using tonight. Let's begin. Habit 1, the dichotomy of control. Nearly 2,000 years ago, a man named Epictetus opened his teachings with a single sentence that has quietly changed more lives than almost any other idea in human history. Some things are up to us, and some things are not. That's it. That is the seed of everything we are about to discuss. Read it again if you need to, because everything the Stoics ever taught about peace of mind grows out of this one root. Let me tell you about a man I'll call James. James was a mid-level manager at a logistics company. For years, his mood was a mirror of his inbox. If a client was happy, James was happy. If a shipment was delayed because of a storm 3,000 miles away, a storm he had absolutely nothing to do with, James would spiral into anxiety, snapping at his team, losing sleep, replaying conversations in his head that hadn't even happened yet. One evening, exhausted, James found an old, dog-eared copy of Epictetus's Enchiridion on a co-worker's desk. He read the opening lines almost as a joke, but something about them stopped him cold. Some things are up to us. Some things are not. James realized for the first time in his adult life that he had been spending 90% of his emotional energy on things that were never his to control. The weather, his clients' moods, his company's stock price, the opinions of people who would never think of him twice, and he had been spending almost none of his energy on the one thing that was actually his own judgments, his own effort, his own responses. The next morning, James tried something different. Before opening his inbox, He asked himself one question: is this within my control? If yes, he acted fully and without hesitation. If no, he let it go, the same way you'd let go of a rope that was never actually tied to anything. Within a few weeks, James noticed something remarkable. He wasn't working less. He wasn't caring less about his job, but the crushing weight in his chest, the one he'd carried for years and had simply lifted, not because his circumstances changed, because his relationship to his circumstances changed. This is the first habit. Draw the line every single day between what is yours and what is not. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome, a man who held more external power than almost anyone in human history, wrote in his private journal, the Meditations, a reminder to himself that other people's actions, the weather, his own body's health, even his reputation, were not fully his to command. What was his? His own mind, his own choices, his own effort in this present moment. Think about how radical that is. The most powerful man in the known world understood that his peace could not depend on his power, because power over the outside world is always temporary. Power over your inside world is the only power that never leaves you. Here's how you practice this today. The next time you feel anxiety rising, stop. Ask yourself the Epictetus question: is this up to me? If your flight is delayed, not up to you. Your effort in finding a solution, up to you. If someone criticizes you unfairly, their opinion is not up to you. Your response to it is entirely up to you. This single habit, practiced daily, is like installing a filter over every stressful event in your life. Chaos will still happen, but you will no longer absorb chaos that was never yours to carry. I want you to comment below with one thing in your life right now that you've been trying to control, that actually isn't within your power. Just naming it is the first step toward letting it go. Habit 2. The view from above. Marcus Aurelius had a habit that modern psychologists would later study and confirm as one of the most powerful tools for reducing anxiety. He called it, in his own private writing, viewing things from above. Picture this. You are furious. Someone has wronged you. A colleague took credit for your work. A friend said something cutting. A stranger cut you off in traffic and gestured rudely as they passed. In the moment, your entire world shrinks down to that single event. It feels enormous. It feels like the center of the universe. Marcus Aurelius would deliberately zoom out. He imagined himself rising above the argument, above the city, above the country, seeing the endless flow of human beings, all rushing about their small dramas, all bound by the same brief mortal life, all part of the same vast unfolding of nature. From that height, the insult that felt world-ending a moment ago becomes almost comically small. Let me tell you about a woman I'll call Elena. Elena worked in a competitive corporate environment where office politics were a daily reality. One particular colleague, in a meeting with senior leadership, deliberately misrepresented a project Elena had led, taking credit for her ideas in front of the people who decided promotions. Elena felt her face go hot, her heart pound, the old familiar surge of humiliation and rage. But Elena had been practicing something for months. She had trained herself, the moment she felt that surge, to mentally step outside the room. She imagined the building from above, hundreds of people in hundreds of offices, each one convinced their own meeting was the most important thing happening on the planet at that exact moment. She imagined the city from above, millions of lives, millions of small conflicts just like hers, unfolding in parallel. None of them remembered 100 years from now. She imagined the earth itself, spinning quietly in the dark, utterly indifferent to the meeting happening in that one room. By the time the meeting ended, Eleanor's fury had not vanished, but it had shrunk down to a manageable size. She was able to speak to her colleague privately and directly, without her voice shaking, without her judgment clouded by the acid heat of humiliation. She handled it because she had already handled her own mind first. This is the second habit. Zoom out before you respond. The Stoics understood something we constantly forget in the heat of the moment, that almost everything, That feels catastrophic right now will feel like a footnote in 5 years, and like nothing at all in 50. This isn't meant to make your feelings small or unimportant. It's meant to put them in their true proportion so that you respond to them wisely instead of being swallowed by them. Try this the next time something upsets you. Pause. Take one slow breath, and in your mind rise. See the room from above. See the building. See the city. See the curve of the planet turning slowly beneath. A sky full of stars that were burning long before you were born and will keep burning long after you're gone. From up there, ask yourself, does this still deserve to control me? 9 times out of 10, the honest answer is no. If this idea is resonating with you, do me a favor and hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need to hear this. And I promise you, habit number 4 is going to build directly on what we just covered. Habit 3. Premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. Here is a Stoic idea that sounds, on the surface, deeply strange, even uncomfortable. Seneca called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. In plain language, deliberately imagining the bad things that could happen to you before they happen. Now, your first instinct might be to think, isn't that just anxiety? Isn't that catastrophizing, the very thing therapists tell us to avoid? It is the opposite, and the difference is everything. Anxiety is imagining disaster while feeling powerless against it, spinning in fear, in a loop, with no resolution. Premeditatio malorum is imagining disaster on your own terms, calmly, deliberately, in order to rehearse your response and strip the event of its power to shock you. Seneca wrote to his friend, Lucilius, that nothing happens to the wise person against their expectation. Not because the wise person is lucky, but because the wise person has already, in the quiet of their own mind, walked through the worst-case scenario and made peace with it in advance. Let me tell you about a man named Marco. Marco ran a small family restaurant that had been his father's before him. Every single day, Marco lived in low-grade terror that something would go wrong. A health inspection, a bad review, a slow season that could sink the business. This fear didn't protect him. It exhausted him. He was reactive, snapping at staff, sleeping poorly, treating every small hiccup as if it were the beginning of the end. A regular customer, an older gentleman who came in every Thursday, noticed Marco's exhaustion and told him about Seneca's practice. Marco was skeptical. How could imagining disaster possibly make him feel better? But he tried it anyway. Each morning before opening the restaurant, Marco spent 5 quiet minutes doing something deliberate. He imagined, calmly and specifically, what if we get a bad review today? What if a pipe bursts? What if we have to close for a month? And for each scenario, he didn't just imagine the disaster. He imagined himself handling it, calling a plumber, responding to the review with grace, cutting costs and adjusting if needed. He rehearsed not the disaster, but his own competence in the face of it. Something shifted. The everyday problems of running a restaurant, the ones that used to send Marco into a spiral, now felt almost mundane compared to the scenarios he had already mentally survived. A bad review that would have ruined his week a year earlier now barely registered. He had already been there in his mind, and he had already gotten through it. This is the third habit. Rehearse adversity before it arrives, so it never catches you unprepared. I want to be very clear about something, because this is where people misunderstand this practice. This is not about living in fear of the future. It is the opposite. It is a way of taking fear's power away by facing it directly, on your own schedule, rather than letting it ambush you at 3 a.m. Try this tonight. Spend just 2 or 3 minutes thinking through a challenge. You're quietly dreading a difficult conversation, a possible setback at work, even the universal truth that everyone we love, and we ourselves, will not be here forever. Don't spiral. Simply and calmly imagine, if this happened, how would I respond? See yourself responding with steadiness. Then let it go. You are not inviting disaster by thinking about it. You are simply refusing to be caught by surprise by the one guarantee life gives all of us, that things will not always go the way we planned. Habit 4. Amor fati, the love of one's fate. If premeditatio malorum is about preparing for hardship before it comes, our fourth habit is about what you do the moment hardship actually arrives. And it might be the single most transformative idea in the entire Stoic tradition. The Stoics, and later Nietzsche, who borrowed and popularized the Latin phrase, called it amor fati, the love of one's fate. Not mere acceptance, not gritted teeth endurance, love. Marcus Aurelius wrote something extraordinary in his Meditations, that a log thrown on a fire doesn't resist the flame. It becomes brighter and more radiant because of it. He suggested that everything that happens to us, even what looks like misfortune, can become fuel, material that a well-trained mind transforms into something that makes it stronger, not weaker. Let me tell you about Elena again, the same woman from Habit 2, whose colleague tried to steal credit for her work. A year after that meeting, something far more serious happened to her. She was let go not for performance, but as part of a company-wide restructuring that had nothing to do with her merit. 15 years of loyalty ended in a 10-minute phone call. Elena's first instinct was the same as anyone's would be: grief, anger, a sense that this was deeply unfair. And it was unfair. The Stoics never asked us to pretend hardship doesn't hurt, or that injustice isn't real. But after allowing herself that grief, Elena remembered amor fati. Not "I'm fine with this" in a hollow, forced way, but a genuine, active question: what can this moment make of me? She realized she had spent 15 years wanting to start her own consulting practice, but fear of leaving stability had always stopped her. The restructuring, the very event that felt like the end of her career, had actually removed the one obstacle she'd never had the courage to remove herself. Within 8 months, Elena had built a small but thriving consultancy, one that paid her more, gave her more freedom, and used her skills more fully than her old position ever had. Elena didn't get lucky. She simply refused to treat the event as pure loss. She looked for the log in the fire, and she let it make her brighter. This is the fourth habit. Don't just accept what happens to you. Actively look for what it can build in you. I want to be honest with you here, because this idea, taken the wrong way, can sound almost cruel, as if we're saying tragedy is secretly a gift, or that people should be grateful for their suffering. That is not what the Stoics meant, and it's not what I mean. Some things that happen to us are simply painful. Full stop, and we are allowed to grieve them fully. But even inside real grief, Amor fati asks one honest question. Given that this has happened, and it has, what is the most useful, most life-giving way I can relate to it? Because you cannot change the past. You cannot undo the event. The only variable still in your hands is what you do with it next. If you've ever turned a personal setback into something that made you stronger, I would genuinely love to read about it. Drop it in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Habit 5. The discipline of silence and reflection. Every night, Seneca sat down and asked himself a series of quiet, unflinching questions. What bad habit have I cured today? What fault have I resisted? In what way am I better? This was not self-punishment. It was maintenance, the same way you check the health of a garden, or tighten the bolts on a machine before they have a chance to rust and fail. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, despite commanding armies and managing a government that spanned 3 continents, still made time, every single day, to withdraw into silence and write. Not for anyone else, not for publication. His meditations were never meant to be read by us. They were his own private conversation with himself, a way of examining his thoughts before his thoughts could quietly examine and control him. Let me tell you about James one more time, the logistics manager from our first habit. Once he began practicing the dichotomy of control, his anxiety improved. But he noticed something else. Without a regular practice of reflection, old patterns would creep back in slowly, almost invisibly. Until weeks later he'd realize he was right back where he started. So James began a simple evening ritual. 5 minutes every night, no phone, no screen, just 3 questions, written in a small notebook. What went well today and why? Where did I let something outside my control disturb my peace? What is one thing I will do differently tomorrow? At first it felt almost silly, like homework. But within a month, James noticed something powerful. He was catching his own patterns days earlier than before. He'd notice on a Tuesday that he'd been short-tempered 3 days in a row, and instead of waiting for it to explode into a real conflict, he could quietly ask why and course-correct before any damage was done. This is the 5th habit. Build a daily practice of honest, quiet reflection. You don't need an ornate leather journal or hours of free time. You need 5 minutes and the willingness to be honest with yourself. The mind, left completely unexamined, drifts, the same way a ship without a hand on the wheel drifts, slowly, without anyone noticing, until it's miles off course. A few minutes of quiet reflection each day is the hand on the wheel. Tonight, before you sleep, try just one question. Where did I let something outside my control disturb my peace today? Write the answer down, even if it's just one sentence. You will be astonished at what a difference this makes within a single week.
Habit 6, the inner citadel, guarding your judgments. We are now at the habit I promised you earlier. The one that ties every other habit together, and the one that separates people who merely understand Stoicism from people who actually practice it. Here is the deepest insight the Stoics ever offered, and I want you to really sit with it. It is never the event itself that disturbs you. It is your judgment about the event. Epictetus put it this way: people are not disturbed by things, but by the opinions they hold about those things. Marcus Aurelius echoed it constantly in his own private notes. Take away the judgment, and the complaint about being harmed disappears. Take away the complaint, and the harm itself disappears. This is not a claim that bad things don't happen. Bad things happen, genuinely objectively bad things. What the Stoics discovered through relentless observation of their own minds is that between the event and your sufferings, there is always a hidden step, the judgment you layer on top of the event. And that hidden step is the only part of the whole process that actually belongs to you. Let me bring back Marco, our restaurant owner. Long after he'd mastered Premeditatio malorum, Marco faced his hardest test yet. A former employee, fired for repeated theft, spread false rumors online, claiming the restaurant served spoiled food. It wasn't true. But the rumor spread fast, and for 2 agonizing weeks, reservations dropped by half. Marco's first reaction was the event itself, a false rumor, hurting his business. But his judgment about the event was a second, separate layer, entirely of his own making. This means my reputation, built over decades, is now permanently ruined. This means I am powerless. This means I have failed. Marco had trained himself, through the previous habits, to notice this second layer as it happened. He paused. He asked, is the event itself, the false rumor existing, within my control? No. Was his judgment that this meant permanent ruin actually true? Or was it simply the most catastrophic story his fear could tell him? He chose a different judgment, not denial, the different, more accurate story. This is a false claim. I can respond with facts, with the loyalty of years of real customers, and with time. This is a problem to solve, not a verdict on my worth.
Marco calmly posted a transparent, factual response. He invited health inspectors for an unscheduled visit and posted the clean results publicly. He asked loyal customers, unprompted, to share their honest experiences. Within a month, the business had not just recovered, it had grown, because the community had rallied around him. The rumor was the event. Marco's judgment about what the rumor meant was the true battlefield. And that battlefield was the only one he ever actually had the power to fight on. This is the 6th habit, the master habit. Train yourself to separate the event from your judgment about the event. Because your judgment is the only part you actually control, and it is where all your suffering and all your peace truly comes from. Every single time you feel disturbed, ask yourself this precise question. Is it the event upsetting me? Or is it the story I'm telling myself about the event? This single question, asked consistently, is what the Stoics called guarding the inner citadel, the fortress inside you, that no external circumstance can ever storm, unless you yourself open the gates by handing over your judgment to something outside your control. This is the habit that makes every other habit work. The dichotomy of control depends on it. The view from above depends on it. Premeditatio malorum depends on it. Amor fati depends on it. This is the load-bearing wall of the entire structure. If this video is genuinely helping you see your own mind more clearly, this is exactly the moment to subscribe, because we go deeper into this exact practice, guarding your judgments moment to moment, throughout this entire channel. Habit 7, Memento mori, the remembrance of death. We end, fittingly, where the Stoics themselves so often ended their reflections, with death. Memento mori. Remember that you will die. I know how that sounds. It sounds heavy, maybe even morbid, for a video about inner peace. But I promise you, by the time we finish this final habit, you will understand why the Stoics considered it not a source of despair, but the single greatest source of clarity and calm available to any human being. Marcus Aurelius, ruling the most powerful empire on earth, kept a servant whose entire job, according to Roman tradition, surrounding triumphant generals, was to walk behind him and whisper, "You too are mortal." Whether or not Marcus literally employed such a servant, he certainly employed the idea relentlessly in his own private writing, reminding himself again and again that his time, like everyone's, was brief, and that this brevity was not a reason for fear, but a reason for urgency and gratitude. Here is why this matters so deeply for your peace of mind. Almost every anxiety we carry, the argument with a co-worker, the fear of what others think of us, the endless scrolling, comparison to other people's lives, draws its power from an illusion. The illusion that we have unlimited time, and therefore these small frictions matter enormously, must be won, must be resolved perfectly, must be worried over at length. Memento mori shatters that illusion gently but completely. When you genuinely remember that your time is limited, not in a frightening way, but in a clarifying way, the argument with your co-worker shrinks. The fear of a stranger's judgment shrinks. What grows instead is your appreciation for what actually matters, the people you love, the work that gives your life meaning, the quiet, ordinary moments, a meal, a walk, a conversation, that we routinely take for granted as though we'll have infinite chances to have them again. Let me bring together every person we've met tonight. James, Elena, and Marco, because all three of them, at some point, described the exact same turning point in their lives. It wasn't a technique. It was a moment of remembering that their time was finite, and asking themselves, if this were one of my last years, would I really spend it disturbed by this? James stopped, losing sleep over emails once he remembered how little of his finite life he actually wanted to give to his inbox. Elena rebuilt her career with courage once she remembered that comfortable stagnation wasn't actually free. It cost her the limited years she had to build something meaningful. Marco defended his restaurant with calm clarity rather than panic once he remembered that decades of genuine goodwill couldn't be erased by a single false rumor, and that his energy was better spent building than fearing. This is the seventh and final habit. Let the awareness of your own mortality burn away everything that doesn't actually matter, so that what remains, your relationships, your integrity, your peace, becomes brilliantly, unmistakably clear. Try this just once before you go to sleep tonight. Lie still for 1 minute and simply remember, your time here is not infinite. Then ask yourself honestly, what have I been letting disturb me lately that truly deserves this much of my finite, irreplaceable life? For almost everyone who tries this, the answer is humbling. And that humility is not despair, it is freedom. Let's return to that man standing in the burning city. We now know his secret. It wasn't luck. It wasn't a personality he was simply born with. It was 7 deliberate habits, practiced daily, brick by brick, until they became an inner citadel that no fire, no storm, no betrayal could ever burn down. He knew the difference between what was his and what was not. He could rise above any single moment and see it in its true small proportion. He rehearsed hardship calmly so it could never ambush him. He looked for what each event could build in him, rather than only what it took away. He examined his own mind honestly, every single day, so that drift never went unnoticed. He guarded the gates of his own judgment, understanding that this was the one fortress wall that mattered most. And he remembered without fear that his time was brief, and let that truth burn away everything that didn't deserve his attention. You now hold the same blueprint, the dichotomy of control, the view from above, Premeditation malorum, Amor fati, daily reflection, guarding your judgments, Memento mori. None of this requires you to change your circumstances. Your job doesn't need to change tomorrow. Your relationships, your health, your finances, none of it needs to transform overnight for you to begin building this fortress. All it requires is a decision made today to start laying the first brick. So here is my question for you, and I genuinely want you to answer it in the comments. Which one of these 7 habits do you most need right now? Not the one that sounds the most impressive, the one that, if you're honest with yourself, you actually need. Naming it is the first step toward building it. If this video gave you even a few minutes of real clarity, do 3 things for me. Like this video so that more people searching for calm in their own storm can find it. Subscribe to Wisdom of the Stoics, because we release videos just like this one every single week, each one another brick in the same fortress. And share this with one person in your life who is carrying more than they need to be carrying alone. The Stoics believed that wisdom was not a possession you acquire once and keep forever. It is a practice, renewed every single day for as long as you live. You don't need to master all 7 habits tonight. You simply need to begin. Thank you for spending this time with me. I'll see you in the next one.